The origins of British Columbia are linked to King George III. Issues of his life continue to define us. Georgia Strait, Prince George, Georgia Street. So many West Coast places are named after the King, Queen Charlotte, granddaughter Victoria, his prime ministers, military officers, social network. In the Aboriginal trade language Chinukwawa, British Columbians are still called King Chorchman. The king supported First Nations against aggressive settlers. His proclamation of 1763 alienated American colonists, but remains the basis of Aboriginal legal power in British Columbia today, likened to a Magna Carta or Bill of Rights. His 1774 Quebec Act protected the French language, ensuring a bilingual Canada. It was one of the intolerable acts that led to revolution. King George III valued the pursuit of knowledge. He opened his libraries to all learned people, even those who opposed him. He loved dropping in on favorite authors like Samuel Johnson, who called him the finest gentleman I ever met. The first scientifically trained king, he encouraged new technology. His collection of technical instruments can still be seen in the Science Museum. He nurtured the Industrial Revolution, precisely concurrent with his reign. The king built the world's largest telescope for astronomer William Herschel. He once stayed up all night to observe the transit of Venus. Herschel discovered a new planet, which he named Georgium Sidus in gratitude. After international lobbying, his detractors renamed it Uranus. The king transformed Kew Gardens from recreational to scientific. It remains the world's largest collection of living plants. He encouraged Captain Cook and George Vancouver to make their expeditions scientific, personally sponsoring research. King George believed in the arts. A patron of Mozart, Handel, Johann Christian Bach, he started the Royal Academy of Arts to improve the status of artists. The world's first, it remains an important institution. He donated half his income to charity. After a mentally ill woman attempted to assassinate him, his insistence she be treated compassionately gained wide respect and led to the first criminal insanity legislation. King George believed in the supremacy of Parliament. One of his first acts was to submit the royal budget for Parliament's approval, a tradition that continues today. One biographer called him a model of constitutional propriety in his relations with Parliament. He once explained to tradespeople he met how to vote in municipal elections. Americans had called on their king to defend them from military attacks. King George almost bankrupted Britain, but after 7 years of war, freed the colonists from French, Spanish, and native armies. Under crushing debt, the British Parliament taxed the colonists. Freed from foreign threats, they refused. All taxes were rescinded except for tea. The king believed the colonists should respect the Parliament. The price was still less than the black market tea Americans were already buying. In 1772, all American slaves in England were emancipated. Slaves in America were energized, believing King George would free them as well. The first black church was formed in the excitement. God Save the King, chanted before slave owners, became a first slogan of black resistance. The principle of repugnancy meant slavery would soon be abolished in America. Wealthy slave owners turned against Britain. A white mob burned alive a black man named Jerry for encouraging slaves to remain loyal to the king. The first black church was forced to loyalist territory. Of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence, 41 owned slaves. Others endorsed slavery. Only a few opposed it. George Washington owned 300 slaves. The false teeth he wore came from his slaves' own mouths. Thomas Jefferson owned 600 slaves. DNA shows he fathered children who he also kept as slaves. Scholars agree that only a minority of Americans supported the revolution. Most either opposed it or remained silent. Inspired by the Boston Tea Party, Sons of Liberty tarred and feathered hundreds, and after the war prevented the majority of loyal Americans from leaving. Even so, 50,000 slaves and 80,000 white Americans managed to get to loyalist areas, which became Canada. Some became explorers of British Columbia, like Simon Fraser of Vermont, Alexander Mackenzie of New York, Dease of Michigan, and others. Americans' grievances were with the British Parliament. In the first Congress, revolutionary leaders described themselves as His Majesty's faithful subjects. Well into the Revolutionary War, George Washington was still toasting his king. Later, propagandists invented the myth of the tyrant king. Years after the Revolution, when the king experienced temporary mental illness, the myth of the mad king was added. King George III changed society. He led the world into the Industrial Revolution, made the search for knowledge a priority, gave artists a more respected status. His aversion to slavery, belief in the supremacy of Parliament, and defense of native people from settlers split North America into the United States and Canada. But he ensured a bilingual Canada that would include British Columbia and laid the basis of First Nations legal power in our province. In profound ways, King George III and modern British Columbia are intimately linked.